Hi, everybody. So excited. Hi, Cami.
Hey,
And Julie Thompson is our guest today. We are so excited to have another guest on our Confident Grief Coach show. And so, what we're going to start out by is saying hello to everybody and asking Julie to just share a little bit of who she is and what she's all about so that we can share that with everybody here.
thank you. Good morning, ladies. It's morning for me over here in Australia. So I'm on the other side of the world to you both. So I'm Julie Thompson, and I run a training and certification academy, which is actually a global training and certification. So we teach neuro-linguistic programming, timeline therapy, we do Reiki, we do heart math. So we basically teach and certify people in the field of coaching. And I've been a international life coach and business coach now for about 10 years. And I've been running the training and certification academy for the last 7 years. And I had a beautiful opportunity to meet Cami about a year ago through a business coaching organization. And I was absolutely fascinated about what Cami knows around the grief space. And I became very, very curious because we teach timeline therapy where we help people move through major negative emotions like anger, sadness, fear, hurt, guilt, grief, and shame. And as I got to know Cami even further, and she was sharing her depth around knowledge around the grief space, I became very curious to just dive deeper down that rabbit hole, and had the beautiful opportunity to work with you ladies and take myself through the Confident Grief Coaching School. And it was just such a beautiful experience just to learn how deep the grief journey really is for people, and just the way that you can hold space, but understanding how people process those emotions on such a deep scale, and understand with my work and knowledge behind neuro-linguistic programming and how the mind works, diving deep down the grief path was really fascinating. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. So, Cami, do you want to get started here?
Sure, yeah. Julie, I'm wondering for our listeners who may not know anything about NLP, would you just briefly describe a little bit about what is it? What is it useful for? How can it help folk? And yeah, who might be interested in experiencing NLP?
Yeah, it's a great question. So NLP, which is neuro-linguistic programming, it's basically understanding the wiring of the human mind. So everything is NLP in a sense. So every thought we have, every feeling we feel, and our perception of the world, it's all about the way that our mind is programmed. So if you think about our brain or our mind being like a supercomputer, neuro-linguistic programming teaches you why we think and feel the way that we do, and how we operate, and the language we use, and the belief systems we have. They've all come from somewhere. So if you think of the human brain being like something that you would purchase off the shelf as like a clean operating system, like a brand new computer system, but then you purchase your computer, which is your hardware, which would be the human brain in this instance, but then the way that that computer then operates is dependent on the software programs that you installed into it. And that's pretty much what NLP really is. It teaches us programs that have been installed over time through our imprint phase of life. So depending on the environment that we were brought into, the family, the culture. And so then we begin to have this I guess, a pre-programmed operating system. And so as we develop, as our brain develops, we begin to operate based on a very conditioned model of the world. And so through the process of NLP starts to help us recognize that each of us have a very unique model of the world, which is not reality itself, but more so our interpretation of reality based on our programming.
So, I would imagine, I mean, I'm going to be forthright here. Cami and I had the great opportunity to go through Julie's initial certification program, and I knew nothing about NLP. I really went in quite the virgin about NLP, and it was fascinating because as we start diving into some of these, and we were probably more at the surface level than deep down, right? There's just so much behind this subject, but it was interesting to see how there were so many what's the word, not synergies, but kind of where from the grief perspective, when we're talking about grief and that type of thing, and you talked about the culture and how we grew up and what we learned and all of that, truly how that can be impacting our grieving in the
Yes.
significant loss of anything in our life. And could you just talk a little bit about that? Like, because you've gone through our program and become
Yeah.
certified as a competent grief coach also, and just from your wisdom with NLP and how it really can really change the face of grief.
Yes, I love that you asked that question because you shared a little bit about your experience of working with so many people through their grief and their cultural conditioning around grief and how they like to honor their person. That's just one part of it, but I think the grieving journey itself, if somebody's got pre-existing trauma, from past, things like that, then, because grief is such a traumatic experience for a lot of people, that can re-trigger other forms of trauma in them as well. And I'm sure you've probably witnessed and experienced this in your working with so many people going through grief. It can make an association because the amygdala part of the brain, it picks up trauma. And we have this thing which is called the gestalt. And the gestalt in our mind, it's basically, it doesn't pick up individual events, it picks up emotion. So the emotion of grief, it's all kind of associated. So it will attach sort of grief with trauma. And so it's re-triggering a same neural pathway, which triggers the same biochemical release in a person. So when they might be experiencing grieving for their person, but this is why some people go through such a long grieving process sometimes, is because it's not just the grief that they're dealing with of the loss of the person, it's actually re-triggering a lot of stuff that's stored in their neurology, like in their nervous system. And so I imagine that both of you've probably worked with a lot of people who are grieving, but they're so confused around their grief and they're not sure why they're feeling the way that they should or how they should be feeling. And you can probably pick up the language that I'm using is this should business, and people think that they should be over it by now or they shouldn't be feeling what they're feeling, and it's because so much stuff is stored in their nervous system and their neurology. So it's a little bit how the programming works as such, and I'll go back to what I call the gestalt. The gestalt, it recognizes emotional signatures in the nervous system. And so anywhere that they have experienced some form of grief or loss or trauma, it'd be triggering a lot of that stuff. So even though they might feel like they're grieving and not sure why they can't get over it, if there's unresolved trauma in the nervous system, it's bringing it all up for resolution. And that's why it can be such a confusing, long journey for so many people.
Yeah.
Did that answer the question?
Yeah. I'm thinking of Cami, knowing Cami. Do you want to speak to that a little bit just from your experience and how you can see NLP just creating some shifts for you?
Sure, yeah. Even just hearing about the Gestalt and how the way that our biology works with how we have experienced past traumas or grief and how that influences how we show up for our grief in the present. And I think about just my layered grief experiences, and I can certainly relate to that compounding grief of having these different layers of loss that were one on top of the other. And especially because I didn't have a super supportive space to resolve a lot of what was coming up for me or to process that, how it just kind of got stacked on top of each other, and how each loss just felt even more monumental than the last because I had so much so many other layers that were underneath that. So I have many memories of just, when even the smallest thing, it feels like the smallest thing might trigger that enormous grief and stress response because, like you mentioned, our nervous system has this experience and a lot of charge that still wants to be processed and released, and how these techniques can then support someone in releasing all of that built up energy that's within our body and our neurobiology, and how that can help to free up more space and more capacity for processing the grief that's in our present moment with the circumstances that we're in here and now, with the grief that might be showing up. Which
Yes.
leads me to a question. With just doing so many sessions with NLP and working with so many people, I know you've expressed you've had a wide variety of clients that you've worked with that have all kinds of different trauma and grief experiences. How do you see this unfolding of these layers or this grief processing through techniques like the Gestalt process or timeline therapy? Or can you just speak to how you see NLP or as being a helpful tool when grief shows up for someone?
Yes, I love that you asked that question because when we do timeline therapy is the I call it the big guns. It's like the big tool that we like to utilize to help shift like major negative emotions. And you mentioned the layering process. So if you think about the bigger emotions that most people will experience in their lives. So there's anger, there's sadness, there's fear, there's hurt, there's guilt, there's shame. And I think a lot of people experience a lot of those emotions when they're going through their grief journey. And then there's grief itself. And so with timeline therapy, we actually go through the process of working through each of those emotions to release it from the nervous system. And you mentioned this briefly when you were chatting, Cami, is that once we release it from the nervous system, then you've got basically like a clean slate in your neurology where you can process the current emotion or the current situation. And the way that it works, because most people, we've never been taught how to release emotions in a safe container. And I recall, Cami, you've shared some of your personal grief experience before as well. Some people feel guilty for grieving, or they might be considering other people's needs. And so they might feel like, well, I don't have time and space to grieve, and I need to be the strong one holding space for everybody else. And so what's actually happening from a neurological perspective in that moment is somebody is suppressing their own emotions. And most of us do this in a regular day-to-day basis. They feel something come to the surface and like, oh, not now, or I don't have time now, or this is inappropriate right now. And so we just suppress. And so this is why when some people go through these long grieving, like a long grief, or they might have developed depression over time, because it's all of this suppressed emotion that's never had time and space to actually release itself. And this is why a lot of people might feel like they're overreacting in a particular scenario or situation, because it's like the floodgates are trying to open. The body is trying to rationalize and release this emotion from the nervous system because it's not healthy for us, right? And so this is why some people can be so overwhelmed and so confused, because the body, the part of one of the prime directives of the unconscious mind is to make rational and release emotion like that doesn't serve the body. And so when we talk about the Gestalt and timeline therapy, where I feel like this is super helpful for people that are going through the grief journey, is they can go through, working with a practitioner, go through the process of timeline therapy and release then some of the other negative emotions. So then when they're dealing with their grief, they're dealing with the grief itself. It's not like it's bringing up all of this other stuff, if that makes sense. Yeah. Did that answer the question, Cami?
Yeah, that's beautiful, because I think, I love what you mentioned about just how most of us have that tendency to suppress and bottle things up, and how when we go through something so intense, like maybe someone does die, or there's a divorce, or another major loss that's happening, it's like there's an overflow of like not only that and the stress from that event and all of the emotions that come with it, but now it's like your body's taking that opportunity to just purge and to release all of this stuff. Like you mentioned, those floodgates are open. So then you get all of these old things that just want to move and come through. And that just makes us want to suppress it even more because it feels like it's just too much to deal with.
Yes.
And then we're
Yeah.
completely debilitated from our grief because now so much more is intertwined as far as this trauma from like potentially our whole lives that is still within us that
Yes.
wants out. So yeah,
Yes.
what a challenging and messy process to start to dive in. Would
Yeah.
you share a little bit about how the process works when someone is going to see you as a practitioner, to do some timeline therapy or any other techniques? What can you just, for someone that might be thinking, I mean, I know if I were listening to this for the first time, like, oh my gosh, this sounds like it could be so scary to
Yeah.
release everything that's been built up in my system up until this
Yeah.
moment. But what does that actually look like for people who are experiencing this?
Yes, I love that you recognize the fear that might come up for a lot of people, because I remember the very first experience that I had so much perceived fear about going through the process. And I thought, oh my gosh, I don't want to deal with all of this stuff that's back there. You know, I feel like I'm doing okay in life. I don't need to deal with all of this stuff. And it was very, daunting, the thought of going through that process. So I love that you recognize that somebody might have a perceived fear. However, for somebody that's listening to this who, thinking about going down this route, timeline therapy is a very safe process, and it's not a process of recovered memory therapy. So we're not putting somebody back into their past to relive past experiences. We do it in a way where the client's in a safe, supported environment and they're somewhat disassociated from it. So and the way that the unconscious mind works. So when we're doing the process of timeline therapy, we're working directly with the client's unconscious mind. So they might consciously remember particular events and situations and scenarios in their life. But when we take them through the process of timeline therapy, their unconscious mind will take them to the very first event where they first experienced fear or where they first experienced sadness. And often what happens is the unconscious mind will bring something into your awareness that you totally had no concept of in your conscious self. And so some people might go back to an event where they were 3 years old, or they might go to an event where it was before their birth, and it might have been something that was passed down to them genealogically, like through the family lines or something like that. And so their unconscious mind will take them to a place that they weren't even aware of consciously. And the reason why this happens is because when we release the emotion in the nervous system from the very first event, that's what we call the root cause. Then what it does through the process of timeline therapy, it will release all of the negative emotional charge on all of the events from that very first event. And then it sort of like clears it out in the nervous system. So it's not like we're taking them in and they're going and reliving any painful, traumatic situations, the unconscious mind. So the client's somewhat in trance. I wouldn't call it hypnosis or hypnotherapy, but we're working directly with the client's unconscious mind. And that's where the blueprint of their imprint is, if you like. So that's when it's first stored in the nervous system and in the neurology. So it's done in a very safe format. And we work with each of the emotions individually. So some events may, like, it's possible that a client might revisit the exact same event in their timeline where they felt anger and fear at the same event, or they might have a different event that they'll go to. But this is also why it's super helpful, especially for people that are going through grief. And I'm sure that you've both experienced this through your grief coaching, that people aren't just feeling grief, they get angry, they get sad, they're fearful, because it's like they're flung into the unknown now. They don't know who they are without that person. So it's not just bringing up the emotion of grief, it's bringing up so many other emotions as well. Yeah. So did that answer the question? Yeah, so
yeah,
you go,
that's
Kat.
great. And I'm just thinking about, listening and thinking about who might be in our audience, because, practitioners of various kinds of practitioners and that type of thing, how do you explain the difference between what you're doing with timeline therapy, because it's got the therapy word in there, right?
Yeah.
Versus traditional psychotherapy, and how do you differentiate and ensure that one's not stepping on the other, so to speak, right?
Yes, yeah. So timeline therapy is its own unique certification and it's recognized as a complementary therapy. And the difference between traditional psychotherapy and timeline therapy, and the wording around, like the wording itself of timeline therapy, is we're going in, we're working with something significant that's happened in a moment of time in that person's experience in life. So we're working directly with the client's blueprint. Traditional therapy sometimes is working with the, what would we call it? We would call it it's almost like the symptoms of the problem. So we're working with providing tools and techniques for somebody to actually manage the problem. So somebody might say, well, in traditional therapy, they might go, well, I'm having panic attacks. And so we might go, okay, well, next time you have a panic attack, try this breath technique or try this or try this. So we're working with the symptom of the problem. But where we're looking to timeline therapy is like, well, what is causing the panic attacks? Rather than dealing with the panic attacks, let's find out what specifically is causing it, and let's go in and work through the nervous system so the panic attacks don't longer occur, because the person wasn't born with panic attacks. They were formed at some point in their life. So somewhere within the timeline that an event has occurred and that's caused whatever it is, fear or something. And so then the person now has panic attacks. So we go into the timeline, which is working beforehand. So 98% of the population aren't born with depression, or they're not born with fear. So that's why the process of timeline therapy is such a powerful tool and technique, because we're going into the unconscious mind and we're going back in time before the actual problem occurred, and we're tapping into that and we're able to remove it from the nervous system. It's mind-blowing how powerful the tool is. Like, I've worked with some amazing clients who've suffered from PTSD and trauma and depression, who've been through years of counseling and therapy. And it's not to discount those modalities. They're very powerful for a lot of people. But we've had significant changes in people who've been through 12 years of therapy. It's not working for them. They're still, identifying with that label, that problem. And we've taken them through timeline therapy, and they've been able to reintegrate to them, feeling that they no longer have that issue that they were presenting with. And so for me, when I first learned it as a practitioner, I started weaving in with some of my clients, and the transformations were so incredible that I just thought, this is powerful stuff. And I just became then dedicated to teaching it. And I've worked with some amazing people who suffered from PTSD, trauma, depression, worked with a lot of like ex-police and ex-army who've had like some significant, PTSD kind of symptoms, and been able to really help them work through in such a short period of time. So most of the time when we take a client through a timeline therapy process, we try and do what we call a breakthrough process. And it's usually like a 8 to 12 weeks. And then basically they're having that level of transformation in 8 to 12 weeks, where previously they've been through years and years of therapy. So yeah, it's really, really powerful stuff.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I'm just, excuse me. I'm just thinking, yeah, to someone that, I have a son that's a police officer, right? They're daily, traumatized, or heightened awareness and all of this, and shows up in their bodies. And my son would be the first one to tell you that, right?
Yeah.
And to be able to go through and be able to process it at such a deeper level, because it is like, right, layering upon layering upon layering. And just to get back into because I know with coaches sometimes, traditional therapists may, we don't, grief coaching, are you stepping upon that? the therapeutic model, and we just really make sure that we're not going into that therapeutic model, that if people truly have diagnoses where
Yeah.
we need to make sure that we're working, and it's, like you said, complementary,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of alternative and complementary medicine and therapeutic means. But I think also that this feels like it's just a really good adjunct for when someone's in a therapeutic relationship, right, with a therapist or a counselor, but also to be able to go through this kind of a processing, and then have their therapist or their counselor supporting them, at the same time, could be just like absolutely amazing breakthrough type things going on here.
Yes, absolutely. And there is a distinction. I'm glad that that you're very integral when it comes to that piece of it. It's knowing where the scope, where the boundaries of the scope of works are. And so I think for practitioners in NLP and timeline therapy, we do practitioner level, and then we also do master practitioner level. And it's the more you understand as a practitioner, the more you understand what neuro-linguistic programming is, and the more in depth you sort of, you can go so deep down the rabbit holes. And once you understand what is actually, like, what program the client is running inside their unconscious mind, then you're working directly with the client, with their unconscious mind. So some people will present with wording, and I know that you touch on this in your coaching modality. It's like, what is not being said? So they're speaking a particular language, and this is why with NLP, the wording itself, neuro-linguistic programming, they are running a program. It's in their nervous system, like the program is running in the nervous system, and the linguistic part is the language, but it's the language that the mind is producing, and sometimes the words that they're speaking. But I think for a well-versed practitioner, the more you understand what is happening inside the client's mind, what program they're running, that's when you can really start to go deeper into the inquiry of the neurology with the client. So we certainly don't recommend that we go beyond the scope. And if somebody's got deep diagnosis and they're working with other therapists and stuff, it's important that the coaches definitely work in complementary to that therapist and liaise with that person's therapist. And we always make sure that we're keeping the client safe.
Oh,
That's
always, yeah.
first and foremost. Yeah.
Well, Cammie and
Yeah.
I actually got to witness your expertise on a call one time, where you actually were an individual. It just happened, and watching you was just amazing, and seeing what was going on with your student slash client at the time, kind of sitting in the seat of a client, so to speak, was just transformative. I mean, it was, right, Cammie? I mean, it was like, holy smokes, and all of us that were sitting around, it was so transformative, but you were so masterful at keeping it safe, allowing this individual to just really explore, but it was your languaging also that was helping this person to it was amazing, and I hadn't, like I said, I was so new at all of this, that this watching that transformation was beautiful. And I'd heard of NLP a lot in the past, but I never knew what it was. So I have another question, then I'm going to throw it over to Cammie again. Um, who would be like the kind of people coming into your program to get certified as a practitioner or a master practitioner? What kind of people come to you? What are they doing in their lives? What's their special sauce, and they're coming to you to kind of bring in more? Because Cammie and I both have done it, so I get that, but I
Yeah,
want to
great.
hear it from you, Julie.
We have three main types of clients that come through. The first one is anybody that's just looking for their own journey of personal evolution, personal development. People who feel like they've tried lots of things, and they're trying to get themselves ahead, and they're looking for a transformation of their own personal journey. So even if they're not wanting to become a coach or practitioner, we get a lot of people that are just coming for their own personal development. and they experience their own personal breakthrough during the process, which is beautiful. The other people that we get, and we get a lot of them, is fellow practitioners, so people with other complementary modalities. So we've had psychologists, we've had counselors, we've had a lot of health and fitness professionals. We get a lot of people in the wellness space, massage therapists, nutritionists, like people who are doing work already with clients. They want to sort of add more tools into their kit, and NLP is such a beautiful complementary modality to a lot of other modalities. It sort of fills in the gaps, and you understand why some of the other modalities work really well because you understand what's happening at the unconscious level. So we get a lot of other practitioners. We get a lot of people also in the spiritual space. So, you know, people that are into Reiki and yoga and dealing with like the chakras and all of that kind of stuff. And then we also get a lot of business owners. So people who are just wanting to, I guess, overcome some of their own limiting beliefs in business. NLP is also really great for business because it helps us identify language and how to market and understand like how they can market better to their people and utilize language in sales and how to build stronger rapport with their clients. They also understand the rep system. So whether people are visual, auditory, kinesthetic, or you know, more information based, so it helps them like redo a lot of their marketing campaigns and things. So we get business owners, we get fellow coaches and therapists and practitioners, and then we get people who are there just for their own personal development. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love what you said about like people coming through just for the sake of understanding themselves better. And
Yeah.
because like you taught in class, the most mind-blowing thing to me is how 95% of our brain operates on the subconscious level. So most things are happening under the surface outside of our conscious awareness, and to be able to understand that a little bit more is so powerful, whether you're just on your own personal journey, like you said, just to learn and understand about yourself with your own personal development and growth, or if you're someone who's offering these tools in another healing modality, or if you're a coach, or you know, I would imagine counselors and all of those, you know, just having another tool to utilize, because like you said, it really gets down to that root cause of where these symptoms, or basically where you're feeling stuck on something, how when we can go there and explore that 95% of your subconscious brain that has the answers, that knows exactly why you're feeling this way because of this event at that time that you're still hung up on, and to be able to go there safely to explore that and to release that, how that just pairs so beautifully with, I mean, I'm just imagining that like with coaching, this is something that as I practice and get better, I want to offer this to my grief coaching clients, because I see how this can just really help free up so much of that emotional weight that are keeping people stuck and overwhelmed and stressed out to the point where they're just frazzled by every little thing. And we know that's normal in grief, but to be able to offer a deeper level of support through that, while also helping them figure out those tools to keep taking those steps forward. Because once you're free of all these things and you're not operating on those patterns that have been controlling you in the background for so long, it's like you're a totally new person paired with this new life that big events of grief and loss present to us. Just putting those things together in that grief space is going to be super, super powerful, but just powerful for anybody out there who's looking to grow in a deeper level.
Yep.
Yeah.
But I
It's
can
so
say
true.
one thing that I walked away with, which was mind blowing to me, is the little exercise where you take a food, possibly something that you know you enjoy, maybe a little bit more than would be healthy for you, or whatever the case may be. And mine was Dairy Queen ice cream with hot fudge, and I could eat that every day easily. A Dairy Queen. I don't know if you have those in Australia, but they're like the self-serve soft serve ice cream with hot fudge over it. Oh, I just used to love it. And we did a little exercise, and just the way that this exercise that we did, I have not had one since I went into class. and I don't desire it because it
Amazing.
changed, right? It changed my thought patterns, my thinking patterns, and my even viscerally how I felt about it because we shifted it. We shifted it in the
Yes.
neurobiology.
I was going to ask whether you'd had any since the training. You haven't.
No,
Amazing.
no. I get asked a lot. My family likes Dairy Queen. Would you like a Dairy Queen? No, thank you. I'm good. So it's all, but
Wow.
that's the
That's
amazing
amazing.
thing. So when
Mm.
we're having you here because it's mind blowing in a good way, right? Mind blowing. And it truly is. It's kind of blowing up that old patterning and tapes that we have, the operating system, right? And we're up leveling that. We're going to the 2.0, 3.0, 4.0, and clearing out the old stuff that is not
Yeah.
relevant anymore for us. We don't need it anymore, and we can find our way to, lead better lives. And I was just thinking real quick, I just did a celebration of life, that I'm a celebrant. And the family, the daughter of this woman that I celebrated today with is the daughter is married to her husband, who his mom had died maybe like 4 or 5 months ago. So this family, it was like we came together, and they see me because I've done both of these, and it's two different families, but they're combined, right, through marriage. Some aren't. And just seeing that cumulative effect of that grieving, and then boom, another grief on top of it. And so as you're talking, it's like, all of that past stuff is like informing how they are today, and will inform them how they're moving into the future. And now it's layered. And that's what
Yeah.
happens. Like Cami was saying, we have the continuous layers. So it's just such a powerful, powerful thing. So,
Mm.
Julie, how often do you run your programs?
Yes, great question. So we run our practitioner training 4 times a year. It's a 6-day training program. We are just in the process of rolling it out. So rather than doing a 6-day intensive, we're going to roll it out in the 12-week format for people who can't take the full commitment off work. So we should be running our first cohort of that in June. So next month. Yes. So very excited. And then we run our master practitioner twice a year as well. And so the master practitioner, it's a 12-day training, but we're going to do that over a 4-month program as well. So that way it's the time commitment is not so intensive, because I understand a lot of people can't take that time off work. So, and they're internationally recognized. So it's a triple certification program. Both the practitioner and the master practitioner, it's a triple certification in each of those modalities. So we teach a certified practitioner in NLP, as in Neuro-Linguistic Programming, a certified practitioner in NLP coaching, and that's where we really link the differences between traditional therapy versus coaching. And then we also do certified practitioner in timeline therapy, which is its own standalone modality as well. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. It is. So what you have is just so beautiful. And your background is what, as a trainer, a physical trainer? Was that it?
Yeah, so my background is in fitness. So I was certified as a personal trainer and fitness professional. And it was about a year into that career, into my fitness career, that I recognized that there was a lot more that was happening below the surface that was actually impacting people at the physical level. And so that's why I sort of went really deep down this rabbit hole, is because when I was doing the fitness industry, we would have two exact same body types, two people, and they were on the exact same commitment with their nutrition and their exercise, and one person would have amazing results and the other person wouldn't. And it was when I started diving deeper down the layers, it was what was happening in that person's neurology and in that person's environment and the stress that they were under. And so when somebody, I'm not too sure how much you ladies are aware of this sort of side of it, but we talk about the energetic frequency. So every thought that we have, it's not just a psychological experience, but it's a physical biochemical cocktail that's being released. So every emotion that a person experiences releases a biochemical cocktail within their vessel. And when somebody's under extreme stress or grief or fear, that's releasing cortisol, and it's, impacting the immune system. And so that's, I very quickly realized that people who were coming to me for health and fitness, a lot of what was happening was a lot of these people were having like really extreme emotional experiences below the surface. And rather than going to a therapist, they were coming to a personal trainer. And you've probably heard the very popular saying, healthy body, healthy mind. And I'm not sure what it's like in the US, but in Australia, mental health is through the roof at the moment. Like, when we go to our local shopping mall, in the bathrooms there's a poster on the back of the door saying that 43% of Australians will experience some form of mental health. Like 43% of the population is experiencing mental health right now. And we've got a mental health crisis in Australia at the moment. Like there's up to a 12-month wait list for people to go in and see counsellors and psychologists.
Wow.
And just in Australia last year, there was 77 million prescriptions that were written for mental health medication, and 85% of those were for antidepressants. And so when you think 43% of our population is experiencing some form of mental health, and you think about like the biochemicals that are being released in their bodies because of all of that stress, like that's causing sickness and disease, and stopping these people from being healthy and having, properly functioning immune systems and things like that. So it was when I was in my fitness career, very quickly, I realized I needed more tools in my kit. And I wasn't sure whether it was psychology or life coaching. And I literally stumbled across NLP. And I thought, this stuff is magic. And I started weaving it into my, when I was working, doing personal training with my clients, started doing some NLP sessions with them. And it was phenomenal, like the physical transformations that they were having. But it wasn't just physical. They were going home and saving their marriages and coming off medication and coming out of therapy. And I thought, this stuff is so powerful. And then I became dedicated to teaching. Yeah.
That is just so amazing. And so, yeah, and it's Mental Health Awareness Month. I don't know if you have that, if that's like across international or if it is just here in the United
Yeah.
States, but that's, the statistics we know. And I mean, we talk about that with grief, but we know that the mental health is across the board, every
Yeah.
country, people are dealing with this. And so it's so beautiful that you have taken this as your love and how you want to just help others to learn about it and to experience it and to really lead these healthy, beautiful, wonderful lives. And that's why we're all here, right? That's why we are all
Yes.
here doing that same thing. And so I just want to tell our viewers that, Cami and I are I'm so thrilled that Julie met Cami and Cami then introduced Julie to me. And together we have just created this great synergy with each other and relationship. And so that's why I really wanted Julie on, because this stuff is really, really important. So if you are someone who's listening to this because you're struggling a bit and you just know that there's some challenges that you have that you would like to, overcome and break through, Julie's program is for you. If you are in the helping profession, right? That's a broad, right? Whether you're coaches like we are, whether you're therapists, whether you're counselors, whether you're working in the healing arts, any of that. These are the things that you can bring forward. And, I really encourage you. We're going to have Julie's information in our show notes, but to really check it out. It's fascinating. And Cami and I are just like, we're all in. So we're pretty excited about it. And it's like practice helps. And so Cami and I are going to be practicing more with each other on this too, because there's so much gold here. But I'm going to keep not eating Dairy Queen ice cream with the hot fudge. Cami, do you have anything?
No, I'm just taking it all in. I love every little bit of what I've learned so far about NLP, and I'm very excited to keep going down that rabbit hole with you, Julie, with your master practitioner training coming up. And yeah, I guess for those who are interested in taking that dive with you and your Advanced Mind Academy, how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, beautiful. So at the moment, we're in the process of redoing up our website. So stay tuned for that. But you can check us out on Facebook. It's called Advanced Mind Academy, or you can connect with me via advancedmindacademy@gmail.com, or connect with me directly on Facebook. And I will definitely keep you both posted for when we upgrade with our website, and that way you can add it to the show notes as well, to keep the audience informed. But if anybody knows yourself or Pat directly, they can just get in contact with you, and you girls can connect me directly with them. Yeah, so it's open to students right across the globe. So the certifications, like I mentioned, they're internationally recognized. We're recognized by the American Board of NLP and the American Board of Timeline Therapy Association. So, and they are recognized internationally. So that way it doesn't matter which country you're in. We run the programs live via Zoom. So it's fully interactive, live via Zoom. You get access to your training manuals and everything like that as well. Yeah.
Beautiful. It's
Awesome.
beautiful. That's very robust. It's such a robust program. So thank you so much for being our guest. We're just absolutely thrilled to have you on. And any final words, Cami?
No, not for me. How about you, Julie?
No, thank you very much for the opportunity, and I'm just so delighted that you're sort of sharing this with the grief community, because you know the grieving journey really does bring up so many different emotions besides just grief, and it can feel so overwhelming for the people that are on that journey. So you know, these tools are so powerful to really help them move through different areas as well. So, and I know that when somebody is experiencing grief, it's like the unconscious mind is like, oh, well, here's an opportunity. Let's deal with everything while we're going through this.
Yep.
And that's why it can feel like such an overwhelming journey for so many people. So I'm really glad that you're sharing this in this space.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for your time, Julie, and thanks for sharing what you do with the world. I know it's so powerful, and I'm excited to just keep learning from you. So thank you. Thanks for sharing your wisdom with us and our audience.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you so much. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank